Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something a little different.
Mm,
Usually we look at a specific concept or, a historical event, but today we are looking at a person.
right. A person who really embodies this collision of two completely different
Yeah,
worlds.
we're talking about Aravind Adiga.
And it's a name that carries a lot of weight in literary circles, obviously. But the reason we picked him for a deep dive isn't just because he wrote one incredibly famous book.
No.
It's because of the road he took to get there. It's not the typical path.
Yeah, that's the hook for me. Because if you look at the typical sort of literary sensation origin story,
Hmm.
it usually involves an MFA program, right?
Right. Maybe some poetry published in obscure journals, a lot of brooding in coffee shops.
Exactly. Adiga's path was, well, messier? Or maybe cleaner is the word, but in a corporate sense.
That's a good way to put it. This is a man who spent his days analyzing the stock market.
It's unbelievable.
He was wading through financial reports, tracking global capital flows, interviewing CEOs, and then he just turns around and writes a novel that wins the Man Booker Prize on his very first try.
It's the ultimate aha moment. I
Okay.
mean, just think about the headspace difference there.
Yeah.
In the morning, you're writing for Money Magazine, trying to explain why a particular tech stock is overvalued. And then in the evening, you're channeling the voice of a murderer from the backstreets of Delhi.
It creates this fascinating tension in his work, you know. You have the rigid discipline of facts and numbers
Right.
colliding with this wild, untamed freedom of fiction. And that's really our mission today. We aren't just doing a biography.
No, this is an unpacking.
Yeah, we want to unpack how a financial journalist used what he called his return ticket to India
Right.
to expose the gritty underbelly of its class system in a way that, frankly, no one else was really doing at that time.
And we have a lot to get through. We've got stacks of biographical data. We've got his journalism archives. We've got all the critical reception of his novels.
Yeah. It's a mountain of material.
It is. We're going to trace his journey from South India all the way to Australia, then to the Ivy League, and finally back to the beautiful chaos of New Delhi.
And we absolutely cannot forget the detour where he interviewed Donald Trump.
Oh, we are definitely spending time on that. That is my favorite nugget in this whole research pile. It feels like a glitch in the simulation.
It really does. But beyond the trivia, we need to analyze the White Tiger, of course, but also his later work. He's written about cricket, about real estate, about undocumented immigrants in Australia.
He's got so much to say about who gets to succeed in the modern world.
And who gets left behind?
So let's stop looking at the map and actually start the drive. If we want to figure out how a guy ends up bridging the gap between Wall Street reporting and literary fiction, we can't just look at his resume.
No, you have to go back to the beginning.
We have to look at his roots. And honestly, his start in life was, well, it wasn't exactly the slumdog narrative you might expect, given his subject matter.
No, not at all. And that's a crucial distinction to make right up front. Aravind Adiga was born on October 23rd, 1974, in Madras, which is now Chennai, of course.
Right.
But his family roots are really in Mangalore, in the state of Karnataka.
Okay, but let's dig into the family tree for a second, because this is where that whole struggling artist narrative just completely falls apart.
It completely evaporates. He comes from a very established, very prestigious lineage. His paternal grandfather, Kesari Narayana Adiga, wasn't just, a local businessman.
No.
He was the chairman of Karnataka Bank.
Okay, so let's just pause on that. We're talking about serious financial literacy at the dinner table.
Oh, for sure.
If your grandfather runs a bank, you grow up understanding what interest rates do to people. You understand capital, you understand leverage. It's in the water you drink.
Precisely. And then on the other side of the family, his maternal great-grandfather, U. Rama Rao, was a popular medical practitioner and a really significant politician in Madras.
So on both sides, you have this DNA of public service, finance, and professional success.
Right. He grew up in an environment where high achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was the baseline. It was the absolute expectation.
It sets the stage for incredibly high expectations.
Yeah.
He grew up in Mangalore, attending Canara High School, and then St. Aloysius College. So up until about 1990, he's deeply embedded in the Indian educational system.
Right. And for those who aren't familiar, St. Aloysius is a Jesuit institution.
So it's rigorous.
It's very rigorous. It values disciplines, intellectualism. It's a very serious place. But then everything changes. The family emigrates.
They move down under to Sydney, Australia.
And this is the first major pivot point in his life. He goes from Mangalore, India, to Sydney, Australia. And he enrolls in a school called James Roos Agricultural High School.
Okay, wait, agricultural high school. That sounds like he's out learning to drive tractors or shear sheep or something. Is that what he was doing?
See, that's what the name suggests, but James Roos is actually legendary in Australia for a completely different reason. It is consistently the highest performing academic school in all of New South Wales. It is an absolute academic pressure cooker.
So it's not about farming. It's about absolutely crushing the equivalent of the SATs.
Exactly. It's a selective public school. It's incredibly, incredibly competitive. So just try to imagine this for a second.
Yeah.
You're a teenage immigrant. You've just landed in a brand new country, and you are thrown into the most intellectually competitive environment in the entire state.
That experience of being the outsider who has to not just keep up but outperform the insiders, that had to have shaped his work ethic.
It must have. The pressure would be immense.
It sounds exhausting, honestly. But clearly he thrived on it. Because the academic journey didn't stop in Sydney. He just keeps leveling up. From Sydney, he heads to New York City.
To Columbia University. He enters the Ivy League to study English literature. And he didn't just scrape by. He graduated as the salutatorian of the class of 1997.
Salutatorian at Columbia. That is a massive, massive achievement. But I want to dig into who he was learning from, because the names here really matter. I saw that he studied under Simon Summa.
Yes, the historian Simon Summa.
Now, when I think of historians, I usually think of, dusty academics just listing dates and battles. But Summa he's different, isn't he?
He's very different. Simon Summa is a narrator. He's a storyteller, first and foremost. If you read his book Citizens, which is about the French Revolution, he treats history like a character-driven drama.
Right.
He focuses on the sensory details, the blood, the noise, the smells, the individual voices. He makes it feel alive.
So if you're a young writer studying under a guy like Shamma, you're learning that history isn't just about forces and trends, it's about people.
Exactly. You learn that to make people care about the macro, the big picture, you have to obsess over the micro.
The individual story.
The individual story. I think you can draw a direct line from Shamma's teaching to Adiga's writing style. When Adiga writes The White Tiger, he isn't giving you a dry sociological paper on poverty in India.
No, not at all.
He's giving you a voice. He's giving you the spit and the grit and the anger. And that's the Skama influence, that realization that the big picture is best understood through the lens of a single, compelling, and maybe even unreliable voice.
And just when you think the resume can't get any more elite, he crosses the Atlantic again.
He goes to Oxford, Magdalen College specifically. And there, his tutor was Hermione Lee.
Who is a legend in her own right. I mean, she's the definitive biographer of Virginia Woolf and Edith Wharton.
Right. So now he's learning from the master of biography. He's learning how to deconstruct a life, how to look at the psychological motivations of a subject, how to find the narrative thread in a person's existence.
So let's just pause and look at this roadmap again. Bangalore to Sydney, Sydney to Columbia, Columbia to Oxford.
It is a hyper-elite, thoroughly Western education. And I think this is where the critical analysis really has to come in.
Yeah.
You have a man who has been groomed in the halls of the Ivy League in Oxford, studying under world-class historians and biographers.
But, and this is the huge twist in the story, he eventually becomes famous for writing about the absolute grittiest street-level realities of India. It feels like a contradiction, doesn't it?
It seems like one, but I'd argue it's actually his superpower.
How so?
It creates this unique outsider-insider perspective. He has the intellectual tools of Western academia, critical theory, narrative structure, historical context, but he applies them to the visceral, lived reality of his homeland.
So he's not just observing, he's diagnosing. He's got the clinical tools to analyze the patient.
That's a perfect way to put it. He can see the systems at play because he has stepped outside of them. If he had never left India, never gone to Sydney or New York, he might have been too close to the picture to see the frame.
Yeah, that makes sense.
His education gave him the zoom lens. He can zoom all the way out to the global economic view, thanks to that education, but then he can zoom all the way back in to a tea shop on a street corner in Delhi.
And that ability to zoom out was sharpened by his next career move, which, for me, is the most interesting part of his whole resume.
I agree.
We need to talk about the financial journalist phase. Because he didn't leave Oxford and immediately start writing novels in some dusty garret. He got a job.
He did. He went right into the belly of the beast. He started as an intern at the Financial Times.
The FT, the pink paper. That is serious, serious business news.
It is. And then he moved on to writing pieces for Money and Time magazines. And we need to be really clear about what his beat was here.
Yeah.
This wasn't arts reporting. He wasn't reviewing plays or interviewing poets.
No, he was covering the stock market and investment.
Hard finance.
Yeah.
He was looking at numbers, at trends, at corporate movements, at debt-to-equity ratios.
I feel like we breeze past that, but let's stop and think about what that actually does to your brain as a writer.
Okay.
When you are a beat reporter for Money magazine, you are not writing poetry. You are looking at balance sheets. You are looking at leverage. You are tracing exactly how a rupee or a dollar moves from a laborer's pocket to a CEO's offshore account.
That's a brilliant point. It creates a very specific kind of discipline. In fiction, we often talk about world building. Right.
Usually we mean that in the context of like fantasy or sci-fi inventing magic systems or alien planets. But for Adiga, world building was about economic systems.
Right. He didn't have to guess how corruption works.
No. He knew exactly how the bribery structure worked in the transportation industry because he likely reported on the logistics sector. He knew how real estate developers leveraged debt to build skyscrapers.
He brings a forensic accountant's eye to the novel.
That's it. He understands that money is the blood of the story. If you follow the money, you find the plot. Every time.
Which brings us to the moment where his journalism career collided with pop culture history in a way that feels almost scripted. It's 2003, he's a financial journalist, and he gets an assignment to interview a certain real estate developer in New York City.
Future U.S. President Donald Trump.
Let's just sit with that image for a second. You have Aravind Adiga, Oxford, educated, quiet, literary, probably carrying a copy of Flaubert in his bag.
Right.
And he's sitting across from Donald Trump at Trump Tower.
It is a clash of civilizations, isn't it? It really is. I mean, 2003, Trump is pre-The Apprentice Trump.
Yeah.
Or maybe just on the cusp of it.
He's the brash New York real estate mogul. That's the brand.
Yeah. And Adiga is there to ask him about, what? Interest rates? Occupancy levels in his buildings?
Probably the branding of his buildings, his debt structures, how he licensed his name. But imagine what Adiga is observing.
Oh, yeah.
He's watching a man who constructs his own reality through sheer force of will and ego.
That's a good point. Do you think that interaction influenced the villains in his novels later on?
I think it has to have.
Because when you read The White Tiger or Last Man in Tower, the rich people aren't just rich. They have this delusional self-confidence, this belief that the rules don't apply to them.
I think it absolutely played a role. Adiga saw firsthand how power operates in a room. He saw that power isn't always about being the smartest person. Sometimes it's about being the loudest.
Yeah.
It's about projecting success until it becomes real. That is a very specific type of psychology that absolutely shows up again and again in his characters.
It's a great cocktail party fact that he interviewed Trump. But deep down, I think it was field research for understanding the modern oligarch.
Absolutely. But 2003 wasn't just the year of Trump for him. It was also a massive turning point geographically.
Right. He makes the decision to leave the comfort and, the career track of New York.
He moves to New Delhi. He accepts the position of South Asia correspondent for Time magazine.
That is a massive job. South Asia correspondent. You aren't just covering a city or even a country. You are covering a huge, diverse, volatile region.
Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal. It's a massive beat.
And he had a really interesting reflection on this later. In a 2017 interview, he said something like, being a journalist afforded me a path to go back to India.
Afforded me a path. That's interesting phrasing, isn't it?
It is. It implies he needed a reason. He couldn't just go back and, hang out.
Well, think about the pressure of the immigrant family. You've gone to Columbia and Oxford. Your family has invested everything in this elite Western education.
You can't just move back to your parents' house to find yourself.
Exactly. You need a career. You need a reason. Journalism was the vehicle. But I think you're right. It was also a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
It allowed him to re-enter India not as a tourist and not just as a returning son, but as an investigator with a press pass.
And crucially, it forced him to travel. If he had become a professor in Delhi, for instance, he would have stayed on campus. But as a Time correspondent, where are you going?
Everywhere. You're going to political rallies in Uttar Pradesh. You're going to disaster zones after an earthquake. You're meeting politicians, warlords, tech CEOs, and rickshaw drivers, sometimes all on the same day.
You are forced to see the seams of the society, the places where it's all stitched together and where it's fallen apart.
He did that for 3 intense years, a high-pressure, high-stakes gig, and then he pivoted again. He became a freelancer and moved to Mumbai.
And that is when the dam broke.
That's when all that accumulated data, all those interviews, all that travel, it started to transmute into fiction.
Which leads us perfectly into the main event. Section 3. The White Tiger Phenomenon.
The debut that changed everything for him.
So just to set the timelines for everyone, he resigns from Time, he's living in Mumbai, and he starts writing. The book comes out in March 2008.
And let's talk about the book itself for a second, for listeners who might not have read it. The White Tiger is an epistolary novel.
Right. It's written as a series of letters.
From this character, Balram Halwai, who is a village boy who becomes a chauffeur in Delhi, and he's writing these letters to the Premier of China.
Which is just an absurd and brilliant premise.
Totally. The Premier of China is visiting India to learn about entrepreneurship, so Balram decides to write to him and tell him the real story of how you succeed in modern India.
And the story isn't work hard and play by the rules.
Far from it. It's a confession. Balram confesses pretty early on to murdering his employer to steal his money and escape poverty. It's a story about what he calls the rooster coop.
The rooster coop. We have to explain that analogy because it is the absolute central metaphor of the entire book.
It is. Adiga, through Balram, describes the Indian underclass as roosters in a coop at a market. They can smell the blood of the roosters next to them being slaughtered. They can see the butcher's knife.
They know it's coming.
They know exactly what's coming, but they don't rebel. They don't even try to escape. Why? Because the system of servitude is so deeply ingrained, so totalizing, that they can't imagine a world outside the coop.
And Balram is the white tiger, this rare creature that is born only once in a generation who is willing to break out of the coop.
Even if it means becoming a monster to do it.
Exactly. And that voice, cynical, funny, brutal, unsparing, it just caught fire. The book won the 2008 Man Booker Prize.
The Booker is, well, it's the Oscars of literature for the Commonwealth countries. It changes your life overnight.
It's a career maker.
It is. And he was the fourth Indian-born author to win, which put him in some very rarefied company. He was following Salman Rushdie, Arundhati Roy, and Kiran Desai.
That is heavy-hitting company. I mean, Rushdie's Midnight's Children, Roy's God of Small Things, these are foundational pillars of modern Indian English literature.
But Adiga's doing something really different. Rushdie's work is full of magical realism. Roy's is very lyrical, almost poetic in its prose. Adiga was punk rock.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
He was angry, he was fast, he was satirical, and vicious.
And the commercial success was just instant.
It was huge. The Indian hardcover edition alone sold over 200,000 copies. That is a staggering number for a literary hardcover in any country, let alone India at the time.
It just speaks to how much the book resonated with people. But I want to talk at the critical reception, specifically the comparisons that were made.
Okay.
USA Today called it one of the most powerful books I've read in decades. But then they, and a lot of other critics, compared it to two very specific American books. Richard Wright's Native Son and Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man.
And those are not names you throw around lightly. That's a huge claim.
No. So let's break that down because it's important. For listeners who haven't read Ellison since, high school or college, Invisible Man isn't a sci-fi book.
No, it's not H.G. Wells. Invisible Man, published back in 1952, is about a black man in America who comes to realize that he is invisible simply because white society refuses to see him as a full human being.
Right. He's looked through, not at.
And Adiga is tapping into that exact same vein of social commentary.
Perfectly. Balram, the driver, is invisible to his masters. They have conversations about their corrupt business deals, their affairs, their family secrets, right in front of him in the back of the car.
Because to them, he isn't a person. He's just part of the upholstery. He's a function. He's the guy who drives the car.
And what about Native Son?
Native Son is about a character named Bigger Thomas, a poor black man in 1930s Chicago who accidentally kills a white woman.
It's a brutal book.
It is. But the novel's core argument is that Bigger Thomas was created by his environment. The systemic oppression, the lack of opportunity, the constant fear and racism, it twisted him into a killer. Adiga is making the exact same argument for Balram.
Balram isn't born a murderer.
No, the rooster coop creates him. Society gives him only one brutal way out.
So by comparing Adiga to Wright and Ellison, the critics are basically saying that Adiga did for class in India what those authors did for race in America.
Exactly. He gave a literary voice to the invisible underclass. He exposed the structural violence of the system. He showed that the whole India shining narrative.
Yeah, the idea of India as this booming tech superpower
Was built on the backs of millions of invisible men and women trapped in that coop.
The Washington Post called it a blistering description of the inner workings of India's corrupt upper class.
Mm-hmm.
But they also called it funny. And I think that's key.
Oh, it's crucial.
It's not a depressing, miserable trudge.
Yeah.
It's hilarious in a really dark way.
It's almost like, have you ever watched the show Succession?
Oh, totally. Love that show.
It has that same vibe where the characters are objectively monstrous, awful people, but you can't stop laughing at how absurd their world is, how petty their concerns are.
That is a perfect comparison.
Yeah.
It's the absurdity of excess on one side versus the absurdity of deprivation on the other. You laugh so you don't scream.
Precisely. And that cinematic quality, that sharp, witty dialogue, is probably why it adapted so well to the screen. It was made into a feature film for Netflix in 2021.
Yeah, starring Adarsh Gaurav and Priyanka Chopra. It was really well done, and it brought the story to a whole new generation of people who might not have read the book.
It did. But as with any massive sudden success, there was turbulence. We have to touch on Section 4, controversy and the business of writing. Because with great fame comes, well, legal trouble sometimes.
The Booker effect isn't all champagne and parties.
Not at all. Shortly after the win, reports started to surface alleging that Adiga had sacked the agent who had secured his original contract with Atlantic Books. This was the deal that was made at the 2007 London Book Fair before anyone knew who he was.
And Adiga denied this, right?
He did. He denied the claim. And honestly, these kinds of disputes happen all the time in publishing. But the reason it made headlines was the timing.
Of course.
When there is suddenly a massive prize purse and huge international royalties on the table, relationships get tested. The stakes get incredibly high overnight.
It's a reality check. It reminds us that writing, especially at that level, is also a business. It's an industry.
And Adiga, having been a financial journalist, probably understood that better than most authors would.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
But he didn't let the noise or the business side of things stop his output. And this is where I think the deep dive gets really interesting.
I agree.
Because most people know the White Tiger. Fewer people know what came next.
Let's move to Section 5, the expanded bibliography. Because he definitely did not just disappear.
No. In fact, his second book, Between the Assassinations, came out almost immediately after the debut, also in 2008.
Structurally, it's a fascinating follow-up. It's a collection of interconnected short stories, not a novel.
Right. And it's set in a fictional coastal town in South India called Kittur.
Yes, and it was actually written before The White Pager, but published after, which is interesting. It really cemented his voice. It showed he wasn't a one-hit wonder. He had this whole world inside him that he wanted to explore.
It's like a mosaic of a town, isn't it? It covers everyone from the beggars to the busboys to the rich housewives.
It does. And then came his proper follow-up novel, Last Man in Tower, in 2011.
This is a personal favorite of mine. It's about real estate in Mumbai.
Which is a complete blood sport.
It is. The plot is so simple but so effective. A developer wants to buy out an old, crumbling apartment building to build a luxury high-rise.
Standard story in Mumbai.
Right. Everyone agrees to sell and take the money, except for one person, a retired school teacher who's lived there his whole life. He refuses to move.
So it's high noon in a crumbling apartment block.
Exactly. It's a brilliant novel about greed. It asks this fundamental question: what happens to a community when a huge pile of money is suddenly dropped in the middle of it?
The neighbors turn on each other.
Instantly. It's a brilliant dissection of the pressures on the middle class.
And then a few years later, we have Selection Day, which was published in 2016.
Now, if you know anything about India, you know you can't write about its society without, at some point, writing about cricket.
It's unavoidable.
And Selection Day. Just the title stresses me out.
It should. On the surface, it's a novel about two brothers who are groomed by their obsessive, tyrannical father to become cricket stars.
So it's the classic sports dad trope.
But taken to an incredible extreme. Adiga uses the obsession with cricket in Mumbai to dissect the relationship between fathers and sons and the crushing weight of expectation.
It's more than just a game.
Oh, much more. See, in India, cricket isn't just a sport. For the working class, it's like a lottery ticket.
It's the escape hatch.
It is one of the few sanctioned, celebrated escape routes from poverty. If you make the national team, you save your entire family for generations. Adiga just masterfully explores the psychological toll of being that golden ticket child. It's really about the commodification of talent.
And then, his most recent major work, Amnesty, published in 2020. This is where I think the narrative arc of his entire career really comes full circle.
It absolutely does, because where is it set?
We are back in Australia.
Sydney, to be precise. The protagonist, Danny, is a Sri Lankan immigrant. But here is the catch. He's undocumented, he has overstayed a student visa, and is living illegally.
So in The White Tiger, the protagonist was an outsider because of his caste and his class. In Amnesty, the protagonist is an outsider because of his legal status.
Precisely. The new caste system. Danny is cleaning houses for cash, living in the shadows, he witnesses a murder, and now he has this impossible dilemma.
If he goes to the police to report the murder,
He exposes himself and gets deported immediately. But if he says nothing, a killer walks free.
that is a classic Hitchcockian setup, a moral thriller.
It is pure tension. But again, Adiga is using the thriller plot to look at the system. He's looking at the gig economy of citizenship. He's asking, who gets to be a citizen? Who gets to have rights? Who is visible and who is invisible in a wealthy Western city?
And it was very well received. It was shortlisted for the Miles Franklin Award, which is the big Australian literary prize.
So think about that for a second. He's won the Booker in the UK and Commonwealth sphere, and then he's shortlisted for the Miles Franklin in the Australian sphere.
He really is a global literary citizen. He spans these worlds effortlessly.
He does, which is a good transition to our last section here, Section 6, Journalism, Writings, and Style.
Yeah, because even while he was writing these incredible novels, he kept his hand in the journalism game. And the titles of his articles alone tell you a lot about his worldview.
They do. He is not a writer who pulls his punches. Just look at this list. An article for Time in 2008 called The Death of the Indian Dream.
Oof. That is bleak
Yeah.
and provocative.
Then you have an opinion piece in The Guardian called Bachelor Bigotry, and another one in the Sunday Times just called Smack.
These aren't exactly, travel and leisure pieces about the beauty of the Taj Mahal.
Not at all. The Death of the Indian Dream. That is such a provocative statement. It aligns perfectly with the themes of The White Tiger. He is actively challenging the official narrative.
Right. At that time, the world was obsessed with India shining, the IT boom, the economic growth, the new billionaires.
And Adiga was the guy standing in the back of the room, raising his hand and saying, hey, that's great, but have you looked at the sewage system? Have you looked at the inequality? Have you looked at what is actually happening on the ground for 99% of the population?
It's that journalist's instinct again, digging for the truth, even if it's ugly.
Especially if it's ugly. He seems to believe that true patriotism isn't blindly praising your country, it's holding a mirror up to its flaws so it can be better.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground here. From the banking halls of Mangalore, to the academic pressure cooker of James Roos, to that bizarre interview with Trump, to the Booker Prize. Let's try to synthesize this. What are the big takeaways?
Okay, well, first, I think Adiga is a product of 3 continents, Asia, Australia, North America, and an incredibly elite education. Columbia, Oxford. He is not a local writer, he is a global intellectual.
Right.
He has the tools to deconstruct systems because he has seen how they work from the very top down.
Second takeaway for me is that he used financial journalism as a Trojan horse.
I love that phrase.
It allowed him to re-enter India, to really understand its economic disparities, and to gather the raw material for his fiction. He learned that money is always the story.
And third, his work consistently and deservedly draws comparisons to the heavyweights of social literature. We're talking Ellison, we're talking Richard Wright. He is writing about the big issues, class, oppression, and the fundamental struggle for human dignity. He is giving voice to the invisible.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for the day.
Okay.
If you look at his trajectory, Adiga moved from analyzing stock markets as a journalist to analyzing the death of the Indian dream in his fiction.
Right. The focus was very much on India.
But then, in 2020, with Amnesty, he shifted his focus. He's now writing about undocumented immigrants in Australia.
So if his fiction is an extension of his journalism, as we've been arguing.
Exactly. What does that shift tell us about where he's looking now? Is he suggesting that the class war that he wrote about so powerfully in India has now gone global?
That's a chilling thought.
Is he telling us that the next great crisis of conscience isn't just about poverty in the developing world, but about movement, about migration, about who has the right to be where?
And that the border between the haves and the have-nots is becoming a literal physical border between nations.
If Aravind Adiga is the canary in the coal mine for global social issues, we should probably be paying very close attention to where he flies next.
We certainly should.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.